Thanks, Mike and Linda, and greetings everyone from Australia. It's wonderful to be part of this exciting conference. We'll really be looking at how quantum physics and Kundalini are related. So let's get started. There are two fundamental ways to explain the cosmos. Mike, if we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. Materialism believes that matter is the fundamental substance in nature and that all things, including mental aspects of consciousness, are results of material interactions. Next slide. Material exists before consciousness. Material creates and determines consciousness, not vice versa. But some recent discoveries in quantum physics are starting to rock the foundations of scientific materialism. But firstly, what do we mean by quantum physics? Quantum is the Latin word for amount, and in science means the smallest possible unit of matter or energy. Quantum physics studies the smallest level of our physical reality, the atomic and the subatomic levels. The most famous experiment in quantum physics is called the double slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles or little balls of matter behave. If we shoot a stream of small objects, say marbles, at a single slit, we see a single band on the screen where they went through the slit and hit the screen. Now, if we add a second slit, so that's what it looks like with a single slit. If we add a second slit, as expected, we see a second band. So again, shooting our marbles through the screen. Now let's look at waves. The waves pass through the single slit and radiate out, striking the screen with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The band on the screen shows this intensity. It is similar to the band that the marbles make. But when we add a second slit, something different happens. The waves interfere with each other. Where the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. Where two tops meet, they add to create a greater intensity. And so a pattern of many bands is produced on the screen. Now let's look at the quantum level of matter. An electron is a tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. When we shoot a stream of electrons at a single slit, they behave just like the marbles and produce a single band. So if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. But amazingly, we get an interference pattern of many bands. This is astonishing. How can pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave, goes through both slits and interferes with itself. Scientists were baffled by this. So they decided to observe which slit the electron actually goes through. They placed a measuring device by one slit. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could even have imagined. When they observed the electron, it went back to behaving like a particle and produced two bands, not a wave, of interference pattern. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware that it was being watched. Now let's read some quotes from scientists about the staggering implications of this finding. So these are direct quotes from quantum physicists. What is missing from the quantum story is not the central role of the observer in quantum physics, the most important clue we have to answering the question. Observership brings the universe into being. What other way is there to understand the clue? And from another scientist, the choice one makes about what he observes, the choice one makes about what he observes makes an irretrievable difference in what he finds. The observer is elevated from observer to participator. What philosophy suggested in times past, quantum physics tells us today with impressive force. In some strange sense, this is a participatory universe. So we live in a participatory universe, and this is what scientists are telling us, not mystics. The universe is not just a random series of chaotic events. Our consciousness influences the universe. We are participators in what happens to us, not merely observers. Here are some more quotes from scientists. A fundamental conclusion of the new physics acknowledges that the observer creates the reality. As observers, we are personally involved. Next slide, thanks, Mike. We are personally involved with the creation of our own reality. Physicists are being forced to admit that the universe is a mental construction. And from another scientist, the stream of knowledge is heading toward a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. Mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter. Get over it and accept the inarguable conclusion: the universe is immaterial, it is mental and spiritual. And again, I want to emphasize to you, these are quotes from quantum physicists. So now let's tie this in with Kundalini. Over 500 people have completed the first Kundalini survey conducted by the Emerging Sciences Foundation. Their detailed descriptions of profound mystical experiences are truly astounding. Personally, they fill me with confidence that we are witnessing a genuine worldwide expansion of the potential of human consciousness. The survey confirms there are two basic types of Kundalini awakening: spontaneous awakening and awakening facilitated by various techniques, whether they be meditation, yoga, breathing practices, and so forth. When sophisticated statistical analysis was applied to the Kundalini survey data, a fascinating observation emerged. It appears that intention seems to accelerate Kundalini awakening. Mystical experiences increased in people who practiced the following: expressing gratitude for one's existence, reflecting on the beauty and unity of the universe, asking the divine to help with one's spiritual growth, being open to that divine influence. So can intention accelerate Kundalini awakening? The hypothesis that intention can affect Kundalini awakening is perhaps borne out by the fact that quantum physics has shown that our physical reality isn't really physical at all. Some scientists are beginning to acknowledge the role of consciousness in the cosmos. So science is beginning to acknowledge that role. So let's look at some more quotes from scientists. It was not possible to formulate the laws of quantum physics in a fully consistent way without reference to consciousness. And from another scientist, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulating consciousness. One more quote. One scientist was asked if he was implying that an electron is alive. He replied, "Maybe it is. What sense would it make to say it's not?" But please don't think that quantum physics is an esoteric set of mathematical equations confined to dusty blackboards. Quantum physics has been tested countless times. It is the most successful theory in human history. It has led to some incredible inventions: lasers, digital cameras, cell phones, computers, the internet, in fact, almost all the modern machines we rely on. Without quantum physics, we'd be back in the age of the steam engines. So new theories of how the cosmos works are emerging, and they place consciousness as the source of the material universe. Consciousness exists before the material. Consciousness creates and determines matter. One aspect of Kundalini awakening that I've personally struggled with is that Kundalini is often personified. is portrayed as a serpent goddess asleep at the base of the spine. So now let's see if science can shed some light on this. The generally accepted theory is that our universe began 14 billion years ago in an intensely violent explosion, the Big Bang. Over billions of years after the Big Bang, the universe cooled and coalesced, allowing the formation of stars and galaxies. But what fueled the explosion? What force could have driven everything apart? In reviewing the mathematical equations, scientists found evidence for a short burst of incredibly rapid expansion. They named it inflation. But the early universe didn't simply expand, it expanded exponentially. It doubled in size over and over again in a fraction of a second. But then scientists discovered that the equations of inflation held a shocking secret. There is nothing stopping it from happening again and again and again. Scientists call this eternal inflation. Eternal inflation means new universes are continually being born. So our universe is not alone. There is an infinite number of universes, the multiverse. The recent discovery of gravitational waves has lent more evidence to the theory of eternal inflation. The important point is that the laws of physics vary from one universe to the next. In some universes, the laws may not allow anything physical to exist. Some of these universes could be inhabited by beings very different to us. And please note, these universes are connected, they're not separate. The concept of the multiverse is gaining support in the scientific community. Here's some recent editions of Scientific America. So again, it's not just an esoteric theory, it is being genuinely contemplated as the only explanation for the cosmos by many scientists. Now let's turn our attention to matter itself. What is matter? When scientists attempt to gain a better understanding of the nature of our reality, they look at matter. However, when they observed matter at the smallest level, they came to some startling conclusions. Many of us were taught at school that atoms were made up of smaller particles. But as scientists developed more powerful tools to investigate matter, they found smaller and smaller particles. After discovering electrons and protons, they discovered quarks, leptons, neutrinos, gluons, bosons, and the list keeps growing. But some scientists now realize that this may not be the end of the line. These subatomic bits may actually be made up of something even smaller, tiny vibrating loops of energy called strings. So what we perceive as our physical world is really not physical at all. String theory says that everything that exists is made up of this one kind of ingredient, strings that can take on different properties depending on how they vibrate, creating many kinds of particles. String theory is causing a revolution in our understanding of space and time. The belief in a physical universe that was at the heart of scientific knowledge has been dropped, and the realization that matter is nothing but an illusion has replaced it. Many scientists now recognize that everything in the universe is made out of energy. As one scientist expressed it, everything we call real is made of things we cannot be regarded as real. But for string theory to work, there is a catch. The mathematics of string theory requires something that defies common sense, extra dimensions of space. Naturally, scientists began to wonder how many extra dimensions are there. So they went back to their mathematical equations and found there could be 5 or 8 or 10 or 26 or even countless extra dimensions. But perhaps the most bizarre discovery of quantum physics is called entanglement. Two particles can become entangled if they are close together and their behavior becomes linked. If you separate the particles, even placing one on the other side of the universe, they will remain entangled. So if you observe one particle and affect its behavior, you immediately affect the behavior of the other particle. Although predicted by quantum physics, the results continue to astonish scientists. Einstein called entanglement spooky action at a distance, because there is no way the particles can communicate with each other. There are no wires or forces connecting them. How can the choice to act here have anything to do with what happens somewhere else in the universe? One scientist described it this way. Ultimately, the entire universe, with all its particles, including those constituting human beings, their observing instruments and so forth, has to be understood as a single undivided whole, in which analysis into separately and independently existent parts has no fundamental status. One has led to a new notion of unbroken wholeness, which denies the classical analyzability of the world into separate and independent existing parts. The inseparable quantum interconnectedness of the whole universe is the fundamental reality. And again, I hate to keep reminding you, but these are scientists who are making these quotes. So let's summarize how science now views our universe. We live in a participatory universe. Our consciousness influences matter. Can intention influence Kundalini awakening? Science seems to support that hypothesis. Consciousness is fundamental. Consciousness is another word for aware being. Are there beings inherent within physical existence? Are the myths of earth spirits, devas, guardian angels, spirit guides actually true? Is that a conclusion that science will eventually come to? There is an infinite number of universes. Who knows what type of beings inhabit these strange universes? There are extra dimensions. What influences may lie within these dimensions? Wholeness. Remember, all these universes and dimensions are all connected. So coming back to Kundalini, may I suggest humbly that if you're not already doing so, adding intention to your spiritual practice could pay dividends. Whether you believe Kundalini is a biological mechanism inherent within human physiology, or a personified consciousness who you can call upon to render assistance with Kundalini awakening, either way, you have the backing of quantum physics. And on that note, I'd like to conclude by really pointing out that we all are pioneers of consciousness, anyone who's working in this field. And I really salute you all, and I wish you all with your spiritual endeavors. Thank you.